The obese bride cast away for infertility, yet the mountain man with the baby girl begged her to stay. Witness this unbelievable, true, inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. The story begins in the heart of Texas, where wide-open plains stretch endlessly beneath a burning sun, and ranch towns breathe with the rhythm of tradition. In this world, appearances, family names, and the ability to carry on a bloodline are often valued more than compassion or character. It was in such a place that Sarah Whitmore lived, a woman who carried the weight of both her body and the expectations of those around her. Sarah was 28, a kind-hearted soul with dark brown hair that curled around her face and gentle hazel eyes that always seemed to shine with warmth, even when she was hurting. She had been raised to believe that marriage was her ultimate destiny, the measure of her worth. So when she married Mark Johnson, a respected man in their town, she believed she had secured not only a partner, but also a place of belonging. For 5 years, Sarah cooked, cleaned, tended their home, and stood by her husband's side. Yet something was missing, something Mark wanted more than anything else: a child. Year after year, Sarah waited, prayed, and hoped. But no pregnancy came. With every failed attempt, Mark's patience grew thinner. His once gentle tone became edged with resentment. He began comparing her to other women in town. Slender women, women with babies on their hips and smiles painted across their faces. Sarah heard the whispers in the marketplace, saw the pitying glances of the church ladies, and felt the judgment burn on her skin. In a place where motherhood was revered, she had become an outsider in her own marriage. Mark's words soon turned cruel. "You're nothing but a burden, Sarah," he spat one evening, his voice thick with disgust. "You can't give me a son. You're fat, you're useless, and I'm done pretending." The blow of his rejection shattered her spirit. Sarah had endured insults before, but this was different. This wasn't just about her size or her struggles. It was about her very identity as a woman. In his eyes, she had failed him, failed their marriage, and failed herself. Within weeks, Mark made the decision final. He sold their home, took the money, and abandoned Sarah with nothing more than a small suitcase and the bitter taste of humiliation. Her departure did not go unnoticed. In small towns, rumors travel faster than the wind. The obese woman who couldn't conceive, cast aside like broken furniture, they said. Each word was a dagger, twisting deeper into the wound of her pride. Sarah knew she could not stay. She could not endure the pity, the smirks, or the endless reminders of her failure. So with trembling hands and a breaking heart, Sarah boarded a bus heading north. She didn't know where the road would take her. She only knew she had to leave. As the bus pulled away, she pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the flat plains give way to hills and eventually to the towering peaks of Montana. The mountains rose like silent guardians, their snow-capped crowns glistening against the sky. For the first time in weeks, she felt the faintest spark of hope. Perhaps, somewhere hidden in these rugged lands, she could find a new beginning. On her second day in the small mountain town where the bus dropped her off, Sarah wandered into a general store. The bell above the door jingled softly, and she was greeted by the smell of cedar wood and fresh flour. She hoped to ask for work, though her nerves made her hesitate. That's when she saw him. Caleb Dawson was unlike any man Sarah had ever met. Standing tall at 35, his shoulders were broad from years of labor, his beard thick and dark, and his blue eyes piercing yet kind. He carried the quiet strength of someone who belonged to the mountains, someone shaped by the land itself. But what captured Sarah's attention wasn't just Caleb. It was the little girl at his side. The child couldn't have been more than 2 years old, her golden curls tied back with a red ribbon. She clutched her father's leg tightly, peeking out shyly at Sarah before ducking her face against him. The sight struck something deep within Sarah, a pang both tender and painful. Caleb noticed her hesitation and offered a small smile. "You're new here," he said, in a voice as steady as the earth beneath their feet. "Yes." Sarah whispered, barely finding her voice. Just passing through. But Caleb had a way of seeing through people. Years of living in isolation, raising his daughter alone after tragedy, had taught him to recognize pain when it stood before him. His wife had passed away giving birth, leaving him to raise little Emma on his own. Since then, his days had been filled with the hard work of tending his ranch and the tender, sometimes overwhelming task of fatherhood. Though he had managed, loneliness often pressed on him like the heavy Montana snow. That evening, Sarah sat alone on a wooden bench outside the inn. The fading sun cast long shadows across the valley, and the crisp mountain air nipped at her cheeks. She felt the weight of her journey settling on her shoulders, the sense of being lost in a world that had no place for her. Her eyes brimmed with tears, silent and unrelenting. It was then that Caleb, walking back from the store with Emma in his arms, noticed her. He slowed, hesitated, and then approached. His shadow fell across her as he stopped by the bench. "You look like you could use a friend," he said softly. Sarah looked up, startled, but found only kindness in his expression. His words, simple as they were, pierced the silence she had been drowning in. For the first time in weeks, someone had spoken to her without judgment, without cruelty. They exchanged only a few words that night, yet something shifted. Sarah went to bed with a flicker of warmth she thought she had lost forever. Caleb, too, carried the memory of her sad eyes back to his home, wondering why a stranger's sorrow felt so familiar. The following morning, as Sarah walked through town in search of work, fate intervened again. Caleb found her outside the general store, her small suitcase at her side. "If you're looking for work," he said, "I could use some help on the ranch. Cooking, gardening, watching Emma when I'm in the fields." Sarah hesitated, her pride wounded by the thought of charity. But Caleb's tone was steady, not pitying. It was an offer, plain and simple, and she needed the chance. With a nod, she agreed. Life on Caleb's ranch was nothing like Sarah had ever known. The mornings were filled with the smell of wood smoke and fresh bread, the afternoons with the hum of bees in the garden, and the evenings with the laughter of a little girl who seemed to have adopted her as family without hesitation. Emma followed Sarah everywhere, tugging at her skirts, asking endless questions, and listening wide-eyed to the stories Sarah told by the fire. Caleb watched quietly from a distance. He saw the way Emma lit up in Sarah's presence, how the child's laughter returned in a way he hadn't heard since his wife's death. And he saw, too, how Sarah's eyes softened, her burdens lifting piece by piece in the warmth of their home. But he also noticed the shadows that lingered behind her smiles. Sometimes, when Emma hugged her tightly, Sarah's expression would falter for just a moment, as though she were mourning something she could never have. Caleb didn't press. He understood that pain took time to unfold. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of their lives grew steadier. The townsfolk began to notice Sarah, whispering again, but this time differently. Who was this woman who had arrived out of nowhere and found a place in the Dawson home? Some whispered that she was too heavy, too plain, and surely not fit for a man like Caleb, but others saw what truly mattered, the way Emma clung to her, the way Caleb's shoulders seemed lighter when Sarah was near. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the jagged peaks, Sarah sat on the porch, watching Emma draw with a piece of chalk. Caleb stepped out, leaning against the wooden post. For a while they were silent, the mountain breeze carrying the scent of pine between them. Then Sarah spoke, her voice breaking. "I don't belong here, Caleb. I don't belong anywhere. My husband left me because I couldn't give him a child. To everyone back home, I was nothing but a failure. And maybe they're right." Her confession hung in the air like a heavy fog. Caleb turned to face her, his blue eyes steady. "Sarah," he said firmly, "you are not a failure. You've given Emma more love in these few weeks than most people give in a lifetime. Do you think she cares whether you can bear children? All she knows is that you make her feel safe, cared for and cherished." Sarah blinked, tears spilling down her cheeks. Emma, unaware of the heaviness of their words, looked up from her chalk drawing and giggled, running over to show them her work. "Look, Miss Sarah, it's us, me, you and Daddy. The picture was clumsy, drawn in shaky lines and bright colors, but it showed three figures holding hands. Sarah's heart clenched at the sight. For the first time in her life, she wasn't on the outside looking in. She was part of something, and though she didn't yet know it, her story was only just beginning. The days at Caleb Dawson's ranch soon melted into weeks, and for Sarah, each passing sunrise brought a fragile sense of belonging she had never known before. The mountains had their own rhythm, and she slowly adjusted to it. Life was hard, yes, but it was also real and grounding. She rose with the dawn, her hands dusted with flour as she baked bread for the small household. She swept the wooden floors, tended the vegetable garden with care, and prepared warm meals for Caleb and his little girl. Emma had become her shadow, always following with curious eyes and quick laughter. If Sarah folded laundry, Emma sat on the floor with scraps of cloth, mimicking her movements. If Sarah kneaded dough, Emma's tiny fists pressed clumsily into her own lump of flour and water. Each night, Emma tugged at Sarah's hand until she agreed to read her a story by the fireplace, her small body curling against Sarah's side as she drifted to sleep. The affection of a child, so freely given, began to heal wounds Sarah thought would never close. For years, she'd been made to believe her worth was tied to her ability to bear children. Yet here was a little girl, not born of her body, who looked at her with unconditional love. It shook Sarah to her core, filling her with gratitude, but also with a lingering ache she couldn't fully silence. Caleb noticed everything. He wasn't a man of many words, but he had a keen eye. He saw the way Sarah's face softened when Emma reached for her hand, the way she hummed softly as she worked, and how laughter now slipped from her lips with surprising ease. But he also noticed the shadows. Sometimes, when Emma pressed a kiss to Sarah's cheek, Sarah's eyes clouded, as if she were fighting back tears. One evening, after a long day of hauling hay and repairing a broken fence, Caleb came inside to find Sarah sitting quietly by the window. Emma had gone to bed, and the cabin was wrapped in a hush broken only by the crackle of the fire. Sarah's hands were folded tightly in her lap, her face pale under the glow of lamplight. "You're quiet tonight," Caleb said, pulling up a chair across from her. She gave a small, brittle smile. "Just thinking." "About what?" His voice was gentle, but it carried the weight of genuine concern. Her lips trembled before she answered. "Back home I was nothing. My husband made sure everyone knew it. They said I was too big, too plain, and worst of all, that I was useless because I couldn't give him a child. Do you know what it's like, Caleb? To be told that the one thing you were made for is the one thing you can't do." The anguish in her voice cut through the air. Caleb leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I know what it's like to lose," he said quietly. "To have the world take something from you and leave you hollow. When my wife died giving birth, I thought my life had ended too. But then Emma cried for the first time and I realized I had to keep going. Not for me, but for her." Sarah's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You still had Emma. You still had something to hold on to." "I had nothing. And even now, even with this little piece I've found here, I can't shake the fear that one day I'll be cast aside again. That I'll never be enough." Caleb stood slowly and crossed the room. He crouched beside her, his large hand resting gently on hers. "Sarah, you're not nothing. You're not a failure. I see the way Emma looks at you, the way she clings to you. You've given her more love in these few weeks than most people give in a lifetime. Do you think she cares that you didn't give birth to her? All she knows is that you're the one who makes her feel safe and happy." Her breath caught, and for a moment the pain in her chest loosened, but still doubts lingered. Years of rejection could not be erased overnight. In the days that followed, Sarah worked harder than ever, almost as if she were trying to earn her place. She rose earlier, stayed up later, and poured her energy into keeping the ranch running smoothly. Caleb, though grateful, grew concerned. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged at night when she thought no one was watching. One afternoon, he found her struggling to lift a heavy basket of potatoes from the garden. Without a word, he took it from her hands and set it aside. "You don't have to prove anything to me," he said firmly. Sarah looked at him, startled. "I just don't want you to regret letting me stay." His jaw tightened and his voice dropped low. "Sarah, listen to me. I don't regret a single thing. Not one." The sincerity in his tone stunned her. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe he meant it. The turning point came one stormy night in early autumn. Rain lashed against the cabin windows and thunder rolled across the mountains. Emma, frightened by the noise, rushed from her room and into Sarah's arms. Sarah held her close, rocking her gently until the little girl's sobs quieted. Caleb watched from the doorway, his heart swelling at the sight. When Emma finally drifted back to sleep, Sarah remained by her side, brushing curls from her forehead with a tenderness that seemed second nature. Caleb approached quietly, standing in the shadows of the room. "You belong here," he said softly, almost as if speaking to himself. Sarah looked up, startled. "What?" He stepped closer, his gaze steady. "I said you belong here with us. You don't need to run anymore, Sarah. Not from your past, not from yourself. This is your home if you'll have it." Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and unrelenting. For so long she had been cast aside, treated as though she were nothing. And now here was a man who could have chosen anyone, telling her she was enough. More than enough. The following weeks were filled with small but significant changes. Sarah no longer hesitated to laugh, to sing softly while she cooked, or to join Caleb and Emma in their walks through the meadows. Caleb began to include her in decisions about the ranch, treating her not as a helper, but as a partner. And Emma, sweet, innocent Emma, started calling her Mama Sarah without prompting. The first time it happened, Sarah froze, overcome by emotion. Caleb, standing nearby, gave her a nod that spoke volumes. He was ready to share his daughter's heart and his own. Still, the whispers of the townsfolk persisted. Some praised Sarah's kindness and resilience, but others sneered behind closed doors. They called her the fat bride who was cast aside and speculated about why Caleb, strong and respected, would choose her. Sarah heard the whispers, felt their sting, but this time she wasn't alone. Caleb stood by her side, his presence a shield against the cruelty of others. One evening, as the family shared supper by lamplight, Sarah finally spoke the words she had been carrying in her heart. "Caleb, why me? You could find someone younger, slimmer, someone who could give you children of your own. Why would you ask me to stay?" He set down his fork, his blue eyes locking on hers with unwavering intensity. "Because none of that matters to me. You matter to me, Sarah. Emma adores you, and I don't just need a woman to stand in this house. I need you, exactly as you are." Her breath hitched and emotion flooded through her. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she had to shrink to apologize for her body or her failures. She was loved as she was. As winter settled over the mountains, Sarah found herself standing on the porch one morning, snowflakes drifting down around her. Emma played nearby, her laughter ringing through the cold air, while Caleb chopped wood a few yards away. Sarah wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and realized something profound. The life she had been forced to leave behind had never been meant for her. The rejection that once felt like an ending had been the beginning of something greater. She turned as Caleb approached, his breath forming clouds in the frosty air. He reached for her hand, rough and calloused but warm. "You're home now, Sarah," he said simply. Her heart swelled with gratitude, love, and a sense of peace she had never known. She had been cast away, broken and humiliated. But in the arms of a mountain man and the embrace of a little girl, she had found her place. No longer defined by infertility, by size, or by the harsh judgments of others, she was finally free to be herself, loved, needed, and cherished. The story of Sarah Whitmore was no longer one of rejection. It was a story of resilience, of second chances, and of love that looked beyond appearances. And as she leaned into Caleb's embrace, Emma's laughter echoing around them, Sarah knew that she had not only been asked to stay, she had been chosen forever.